computer. There we go. Okay. So in case you're curious as to what the full tune sounds like, and he's got, I didn't choose it. Meg, who does a lot. She's like our one-person studio in the Office of Digital Learning in the Tech Center. She's amazing. Like, she puts a lot of effort into stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about what we've got for the day. We have a total of 6 problems this week. Each is worth 15. And let me turn off flow. So, yeah. So we have 16 problems. Sorry, 6 problems. Each of them are worth 15 points. 5 points each to each of them is, so in other words, a third of each problem is using the generics correctly. You get 10 points for making sure that your code is neat and properly indented, because this is around the time where I need to start enforcing that. And then 5 points of extra credit are available. So to demo it, I'll be asking you specifically about how to solve 2.6, and then one other method of our choice, which will be different from person to person. So your methods are these are basically a bunch of exercises that should be familiar in the sense that you've probably done something similar when you were working with arrays. The big thing here is that we will be using array lists and polymorphism here. So first method is to write a method called unique, which takes in a list and returns true if all the items in the list are unique. Items are unique if any pair, so if you've got 2 items, they're unique items if dot equals returns false. So you're going to use the dot equals to check things. So if you've got 2 items and dot equals returns true, then things aren't unique. So when you're dealing with Boolean methods like this, the easiest strategy I found to doing to these kind of problems is that you make an assumption, like either assume that it's true or assume that it's false. And then basically as soon as you can prove that that's wrong, then you can return true or false respectively. So figure out like what is easiest to disprove. Is it easier to prove that they're all unique, or easier to prove that there's a not uniqueness? Next, we'll be using a method called all multiples that takes in a list of integers, and it's going to return an int. So notice over here I'm saying a list of integers. That means you're going to have to use generics, which I explain in the videos as well as up here. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail if people would like me to. Okay, so this method returns a list of integers that contains all the numbers from the input list that are multiples of the, that contains all the numbers from the input list that are multiples. So if I give you this list and 5, I'm going to return all the integers that are multiples of 5. So 25, 5, 30, and 25. I don't care that 25 is in there twice, right? From my perspective, they're 2 different numbers. All strings of size. So here, like if I give you, I like to eat apples and bananas, and I give you the number 3, I'd like all the 3-letter words from this list of strings. So eat, and. That makes sense to everybody? Have I lost anybody so far? If you're not sure how to execute these problems, that's fine. I just want to make sure you understand your target objectives. Is permutation takes in 2 lists that are the same type, and it's going to return true if they're permutations of each other and false if they're not. We're going to work on this one together on Wednesday because it is a doozy, but I would like you to try it yourself, and I will give you direction. But I'm just going to tell you, there is really no neat way to do this unless you bend the rules. Finally, string to list of word takes in a string and converts it into a list of words. And we can assume each word is separated by white space. And I give you hints on how to do that. And this would be a great time if you want to do the extra credit for regular expressions to kind of detour into that. So for instance, if I give you hello world, your output should be hello, comma, and world. For extra credit, you want to sanitize that string and basically remove punctuation and extraneous characters. Finally, remove all instances, which given a list and an item, you remove all those items from the list. So here I've got a list of integer, 1, 4, 5, 6, 5, 5, 2, and 5. And so you should remove all the 5s. So your output should be this. Now this one has an intentional pitfall I am not telling you about, because the best way to remember it is to fall into the trap and then pick yourself up out of that. Okay? So when you write your program, make sure you test it on this guy and 5. Because if your output isn't this, I'll just tell you, you probably will have an extra 5 hanging around if you try implementing it naively. Okay? This one also don't use the remove all method, because that kind of defeats the purpose of this. But anyway, those are the problems. So any questions about this?
So is this an individual work, or are we going to go into breakout rooms? Like,
you are going to go into breakout rooms. You can work together, but but I want you to basically turn it, you're going to be demoing by yourself and turning in your own code, right? But you're more than welcome to help each other out and ask each other questions and share your code with each other, saying, hey, I need some help with this, you know?
Okay.
What is not allowed is basically saying, hey, everybody, I solved problem 2.5. Let me show you the answer, right? So essentially showing code if you're asking for help, good. Showing code because you're trying to give other people the answer, bad. And yes, once we get into breakout rooms, I'll go through, and if you want to demo, you can demo. Okay? Otherwise, you can wait after class to demo. Now, before we get started, are there any questions about generics? Would anybody like to have me give a 5-minute, 10-minute overview of generics?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Got to always phrase the question a bit differently. All right. So as you can see, I'm prepared to do this. So let's go ahead and open up in our source code. So we are going to create a new class here. And I'm just going to call it example, whatever, because all I'm going to do first off here is create a main class. So cool thing over here, if you're using IntelliJ or NetBeans, you can type in PSVM, hit tab, and boom, auto completion. It's like magic. So here, so a generic basically is a restriction on an object. So if I say list is equal to new array list, which I can do because an array list is a type of list, right? I can put the less specific type on the left and the more specific on the right. And it's yelling at me because I haven't imported things yet. So Alt-Enter, import class. Alt-Enter, import class. Teaching you all the shortcuts over there. Next, let's go ahead and do that. So this is what we call what Java will yell at you and say it's a raw list. Raw use of parameterized class list. What it's saying is that this is a class that uses a feature in Java called generics. If you don't use it, it's essentially a list of objects, which is annoying because if I add list file, basically if I create a list of integers here, right, this is just, I'm just going to add integers to this. Actually, for I is less than, so that was just for I and I hit tab. So so now not but I'm going to do list.add I. You guys can put on the TV. It's not going to bother me. Okay. I'm talking to my family is basically on the other side. So there you go. Okay. So So we put all these items in, and notice that I'm getting plenty of warnings because it's saying uncheck calls and that kind of stuff. So now if I try to go through and basically, so let's go, if I try to go through each of these, so for int I is less than list.size, which is how you iterate through them, right? Through indices rather than doing, you know, rather than using array notation for lists, you use indices like this. So if I simply say, give me, let's say, sout list.get I, and then if I say times 10, it's going to give me an error. So why is it giving me an error here? Well, I put in only integers, but this is a list. And I didn't specify anything special about this list. So Java's like, well, it's a list. A list of what? A list of anything. A list of objects. You can put anything you want in there. Exactly. So it's an object. This means that basically, if I were to say, so here, when I'm taking this list and multiplying by 10, it's yelling at me saying, hey, okay, I see that you're getting something out of this list, but this something is an object. So if I want to do that, then I have to put int here. So I have to cast everything I get out of the list and tell Java, trust me, it is in fact a integer, which is great. But if I do something like this, list.add the string like that, I'm telling Java that basically, trust me, everything is an integer. And now when I run it, I'm going to run it. I print stuff out until I hit the string 1 million. And then Java says, you are a liar. I can't turn a string into an integer. Okay. So this is annoying. You have to put in all sorts of checks. You have to do casting. It's awful. So instead, what we do is use a feature of called generics, which means what we can do is that we can put in something in these less than greater than signs. Specifically, I'm going to say integer over here. And what this does, and we can put the same over here. A list of integers is equal to a new array list of integers. And what this does is that this restricts Java to only ever using integers. Or it restricts this list to only ever using integers. This specific list, by the way, not all lists ever, just this one. It's giving me a warning here, by the way, because I can use something on the right called diamond notation, where basically it will just infer what's on the right. So you only have to put the generic on the left. So list of integer list is equal to new list. And so now Java knows that only lists, this list only can take in integers. In fact, if I look at the methods, list.add, it replaced replaced object with integer. And then if I look at the set method, it replaces it with the object over here that would have been over here with an integer. So we know that everything is going to be an integer. There's no need to cast anymore. And in fact, if I try to add a string, it will give me an error. See, gives me an error here. So that's pretty cool. Now, there are two ways. Now, when we deal with methods, there's essentially two types of methods you're dealing with. Basically, when you're doing generics with lists specifically. The first case is if we know what's going to go into the list. This is what goes on in problems 2.2 and 2.3. So let's do public static, whatever, void. It doesn't matter because it's just an example. Print ints. It's a completely useless function, but except for teaching purposes. Here I can specify that only lists of integers can be taken in by this method, right? And you use this when you know that your method only wants to accept lists of integers, right? You don't want lists of strings, you don't want lists of doubles, just lists of integers and only integers. Make sense so far? Use the chat, please, to tell me whether or not makes sense so far. That is basically the only feedback I am able to get because I cannot look at all your beautiful faces. All right. Awesome. So the other case is a bit more complicated, which is saying that, hey, public, which is we don't know what kind of thing we want to put in there. Public static void. Actually, I'm going to help you with the first one. Boolean is unique, right? Which takes in a list of objects, and I return true or false whether or not it's unique. I'm just going to return true over here. I'm going to assume that everything is unique. But we don't know what type goes in here, and we need to use generics. So typically the way that works is that you use a specific variable. Yeah, I mean, you can use anything you want, but we typically use a variable, either E or T, to specify that we don't know what kind of thing what kind of list we're taking in. So list of E, this specifies that I'm taking in a list of E's. What the heck is an E though? You'll notice that Java is going to ask me an error saying, hey, you're telling me to take in a list of E's. I don't know what that is. There's no E's specified here. And so we add one more thing to over here, which looks a bit confusing and can lead to some issues if you do it in the wrong place. But this is called the generic parameter. This says basically public method, it's static, and we're using a generic type called E. What E is going to be defined by the programmer when he calls the method. This is saying E is essentially a variable that we'll figure it out when the method is called. And so basically, if you pass in a list of strings, all the E's you see in this code will be replaced with string. If you pass in a list of integers, all the E's in the code will be replaced by integers. Is there any difference between initializing integer versus list integer? So somebody's asking, is there any difference between this essentially and this? And the answer is not really. It's just there's a couple of things here. First off, by doing the more specific method, the least specific method on the left, or least specific object on the left, I'm able to do. I can change what type of list. So I could put in an array list, or as we'll learn in 2 weeks, I could do a linked list instead, which is another type of list. So I could basically hot swap it out, essentially, and I only have to change it at one place. So there's really no difference. The reason I do it like this, though, is because it's 5 less characters to type, and that's a very petty reason. However, so you can do array list or a list. It's fine. I do list a lot because it is less to type, and I can change it out very easily to linked lists. All right. So the one big pitfall I've seen students fall into with generics is that they go over here, like to a method that they know is going to take in an integer, and then they think they have to put integer over here. And what this does is that this tells Java, integer is not actually an integer class. Integer is a generic, and we're going to figure out what it is. And so that kind of breaks their code for that method. So if you know what it is, just put it down. If you don't know what it is, say, I'm going to take an E because I don't know what it is, and I'm going to put that there. Any questions before I divide you up into breakout rooms? Because I want to make sure you have plenty of time to work and plenty of time to demo. And yes, I will stay behind for about half an hour if I need to, for up to half an hour to get demos done for everybody.
I had a question.
Please.
So, for when we submit the assignment one for the Fox, do we just submit the rabbit class or the entire project?
The rabbit file is sufficient.
Oh, okay.
Do I ever do, and somebody else says, do I ever do death by PowerPoint? I try to avoid it. PowerPoint I use, let's see. I do PowerPoint when I discuss heaps and trees, mainly because the slides are pretty good. But for the most part, I avoid death by PowerPoint. I'm trying to remember if I use the slides for graphs or not, but I don't think so. But I specifically did a lot of my videos to avoid PowerPoint. And even if I do PowerPoint, then it would only be half of the videos because the other half are typically implementing the how these things go. I find that basically showing examples in an IDE works better than showing you examples in PowerPoint. Okay, other questions?
So also, can we demo during the lab, like tomorrow?
Yes.
Or, okay.
You can demo during the lab. So you can demo during the lecture period, during the lab period, and after the lecture period, and during office hours.
All right.
However, during the lecture periods, if people need help on the stuff, my priority is helping people as opposed to demos. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to split everybody up into breakout rooms. Please let me know if you need to work with somebody.